Hello and welcome to Independence,
the FIEC podcast. My name's Joel Murray. I'm the Media and Communications Officer for FIEC, and I'm joined again today by a local director of FIEC, Ben Midgley. Hi, Ben.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, good. Yeah, thanks. Please introduce us a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you become a Christian? How did you get into Christian ministry?
Okay. I didn't grow up in a Christian family at all, and my encounters with Christians probably at university, very helpful, very challenging, and it took me a while, wrestled through, just the gospel just became an inescapable reality to me, and I had to come to my knees and find peace with God through Jesus Christ, and here I am. I think quite early on, I had the sense that maybe God would be calling me into something, but I realized there was an awful lot of just basic discipleship I needed to, lay hold of. So years went by, I did work and got married and got a mortgage and, started a family and things like that. But I think my wife, she knew from the start that this was something, that might emerge. So I went to train at the London Seminary. It kind of just came to a tipping point, went to London Seminary. And out of the back of that, I went into full-time pastoral ministry. I've been preaching before and doing quite a lot of evangelism and things, but did a church church revitalization kind of thing in Wiltshire. I went back there the other day, actually. It's just great to see the church, how it's grown, and great. I should leave more. I should have left earlier, and now I'm here in North Wales in a little town called Mold, and Ebenezer Baptist Church, which is an FIEC church. It's a very, very healthy work. We've got a church plant that we're involved with here as well. And I've been here since 2019 and recently joined FIEC as the North Wales director. So it's a real pleasure just to get to know the team more and just serve this area. As opportunities and gifts allow.
Tell us a bit about that. How did that kind of come about, starting your role in North Wales for FIEC?
It's funny because, North Wales is about 2,500 square miles, 700,000 people, but there's something about the way it's wired means that it's kind of like a big village. And I can't explain it exactly, but everybody knows everybody. And so the connection between the various churches and ministers was already there. So I think getting involved on a formal level was really just more recognizing what was happening already. We all know each other for fraternals and just on the end of the phone and just supporting each other. There's quite a lot of younger ministers and people reasonably new to ministry. So there's a lot of kind of sharing of encouragement and wisdom just through practical things. And Daniel Grimway was, I was just chatting to him at a conference actually, and he was starting his role with FIEC. Yeah. And it was just already there, I suppose. And it was just a phone call to Phil Topham at that point, say, look, I'd like to serve in some way like this. And it was just, it just met him at that right moment. And so the church here seconds me one day out of the 5, as it were, one day a week to FIEC. I don't do 9 to 5 for FIEC on one day of the week. It's sort of interspersed with all the other duties that pastoral life involves. But yeah, definitely, you put in the hours. Because, like I say, a lot of that was already there. It wasn't like inventing a new role. But formalizing things does help, actually. You make new connections and people reach out to you in a new way. So I have definitely seen the role develop and grow, even in the short time I've been doing it. And that was, it's been a privilege. It is a privilege, yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. And we're happy to have you to work with us as well. That's really good, having that connection as well, in that you're working in ministry and also for FIEC, so that's really helpful. And we're very grateful to Ebenezer as well to second you and let us have you for 20% of the week. So yeah, thanks to the church if anyone from there is listening. What exactly does your role involve? Kind of day to day, the day that you work. What kind of exciting things do you get to do?
Yeah, so it is about building and maintaining good fellowship and connection between, principally through leaders, I think, and through that into the wider churches, and perhaps giving some sense of being able to coordinate between people a bit and help connections. We'd like, in the days in which we're living, establishing partnerships, working together is quite critical. And so people being able to know each other, I think pastoral ministry can be very absorbing, and you end up consumed with, what happens in your four walls kind of thing if you're not careful. It's not that people want that. It's just the kind of pressures of necessity kind of force you into it. And in one sense, being asked to engage with FIEC locally across the area with other churches, neighbouring churches, it creates a dynamic that is helpful, because we've got to stay on mission, haven't we? And I suppose it helps us stay on mission. And the saying, healthy leaders, healthy churches, there's a lot of equity in that statement. So kind of looking at having somebody you can just offload to, not in an unhelpful way, but just somebody who's actually going to point you to Christ in a helpful way and pray with you. And there's you're not trapped in that shame, when you feel like you're failing or something like that. It's so easy to kind of go down the spiral. So just knowing that you can have an informal chat with somebody who's not going to judge you, and you're going to be able to talk things through, and maybe even by God's grace find some good ways forward and ways out. That's really priceless. It's very, I think, getting isolated as a Christian, let alone as a minister, is a potential trap, isn't it? Yeah. So maintaining connections and fellowship, and I get to be involved in the local conferences. So Mid Wales is part of our area. Going down to Newtown, so I was involved there. We held one in Llanfairpwllgwyngyllgogerychwr, which is right in the west of the country, probably one of our most western FIEC churches. And then I actually went up to Liverpool as well and helped Daniel up at Liverpool, because what people don't, Liverpool is basically the default capital of North Wales. I mean, it's our big city. Right, It used to, it wasn't that long ago that the whole quarter of the city was Welsh speaking and Welsh chapels, and there's like a strong interconnection with Liverpool. And Chester's sort of part of our world in that sense in the world. So it's being involved in that. It's a real privilege to serve leaders in that context. I thought the material this year sort of pushed some new doors and made people to think about some stuff that was just pushing into some stuff. I had a nice bit of feedback off one of the conferences where some of the people who helped from the local church to serve us, and they did a wonderful job over at Llanfairpwllgwyngyllgogerychwr, and they sat in and they watched and listened to these ministers opening themselves up to allowing God to deal with them in the same way as the ministers regularly expect them to open up and let God deal with them. And they found that really heartening to think that ministers are working on their Christian life and staying faithful to the Lord in a humble way. And we're not I don't know. I thought that was quite strengthening. I thought it was a really helpful bit of feedback.
We've published some of that material from the local conferences on the website. So if people want to listen in, they can listen to an interview with Glyn Harrison, talk about justification by grace. And there's some other kind of discussion questions and stuff to get involved in that. I suppose pastors are often preaching and thinking, okay, how does this apply to the flock? And then it's very easy to think about that and then forget about themselves. And then who's pastoring the pastor? That's one thing that Glyn says in it as well. So these kind of local conferences, local directors, is really helpful to do that.
And I think in independency, one of the assumptions is, without any formal means, the fellowship of independent evangelical church, the fellowship that we have we have to press into that accountability. So to be frank with each other, to be open with each other. There's nothing worse than how big is your church? How many baptisms have you had? Yeah. Some kind of as if we're not in competition. We're all in this together, and our joys and our struggles are shared, aren't they? So trying to get that openness, encourage that openness. It's already there in great measure, but just kind of keeping that going. So it's a servant role. It's not, although the word director, it's a service role. We're serving the local churches as best as we can. But you'd be better off asking the pastors.
What do they think about you?
I'm just giving you, how I see it at the moment. But I'm certainly enjoying it.
Great. We'll get on to a bit more about North Wales, particularly in a minute. But just very quickly, give a chance to talk about some of the things you're involved in. So you're working at Ebenezer Baptist Church in Mold as pastor.
lead pastor.
Working for North Wales for FIEC, and there's some other areas that you're involved in as well. Tell us quickly about those.
Yes. So I'm also so there's an organisation called Reach North Wales, which was sort of started before lockdown, a couple of years before, and it's just this concern, and we'll probably come on to this. I mean, one of the big opportunities in North Wales is not just like where you have church planting, so a local congregation has got some people in a neighbouring area and they sort of cut that bit of the plant off and establish it on its own right. When we're thinking about church planting, we're talking about pioneer church planting, sending people into areas where there isn't a healthy evangelical church, which might be involving some detachment from the original congregation and going into quite new community. Yeah. There's lots of distinct communities. So Reach North Wales was set up as a sort of a vehicle to support, encourage, coordinate prayer, which we've been doing to some extent. It's the ministers who are involved in it are mostly FIEC ministers, and we do get resource starved at times, and it kind of goes into abeyance, and then we push back in. There's a real concern that we keep. There's been some interesting cooperations with. I don't know if you've heard about Cante Cymru, which is basically translates as 100 for Wales, which is a movement that's come out of the Rhondda in South Wales, the Shawnees down in the south. And they basically, they're Ben Franks. He's just been sponsoring, encouraging this whole thing of church planting over the next 10 years. Could there be 100 new churches, healthy churches in Wales in the next 10 years? So in a way, we've met people like that, and we're working with them, supporting some of their initiatives. So that's Reach North Wales, just keeping church planting on our agenda and being practical about, like, for example, encouraging things like we at Ebenezer, we have part of I think we need nearly 20% of our income goes to mission, and we've earmarked, say, 3% of that will go to church planting, and trying to encourage churches to think about, building up a fighting fund to actually make this stuff happen. Yeah. I'm also chair of the International Mission to Jewish People, which is a long established, it came out of the Church of Scotland back in the 1840s when people, it's quite extraordinary. Like this, in this Church of Scotland, in the evangelical wing of the Church of Scotland, they sent missionaries over to Europe and into London and then over to the Middle East with a specific endeavour to reach Jewish people with the gospel. And I think between 1838 and 1852 or something like that, and there's a book that's just come out of it that John Ross has written, I think 500,000 people came to faith. Wow. And I mean, we're not seeing anything like that, but we've got missionaries in Europe, in Asia, in Australasia, in South America, in North America. And it's very simple. It's just, it's not like some in-depth knowledge about Judaism. This is just, everybody needs to hear Jesus. Yeah. There's a unique ministry to Jewish people, and people need to hear the gospel anywhere and everywhere, and to be discipled. And so International Mission to Jewish People is doing that piece of work alongside, I'm sure there's lots of other people doing it as well, but we have one agency. We were very thankful that FIEC gave us Joseph Steinberg, our CEO, a chance to come and speak on one of these podcasts. Yeah,
that was very helpful and encouraging.
Yeah, and these are difficult times as well. There's a lot of conflicting feelings and there's conflicting theologies, and just keeping the main thing.
Yeah, everyone needs the gospel.
Yeah, John 1:16. It's the power of God and salvation to anyone who believes, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. It's like a universal message, isn't it? And it's to be proclaimed. So we just kind of keep our foot on that pedal.
Great. Well, praise God for those things. And think back to North Wales then. You kind of talked about it being a large village. So we talked with Johnny Prime, who kind of does your role in London, which is a whole different kettle of fish, and much smaller area, but many, many more people. Yes. And lots of villages. So tell us a little, what's North Wales like as an area, if you can kind of boil that down.
I'll probably summarise
and how's it kind of distinctive to maybe other areas across Britain? Yeah.
So I'm tempted to say that it's the most beautiful part of Britain.
Yes.
There may be other contenders, but certainly our area, which is kind of the Snowdonia region, is, world class beautiful place. I mean, it's just stunning. And long coastline across the north and the west. And it's so the 700,000 people who are living here, it's quite unique as far we have officially got cities. I mean, Wrexham has recently become a city, but like it's not a city in the way that you'd recognize like Manchester or Liverpool. It hasn't got that. It's not a big urban. There isn't an urban situation. And so consequently, there's not even really a suburban situation. Right. It's kind of market towns and post-industrial towns. And just millions of villages and tiny hamlets. And it's all sort of almost like there's a medieval network of kind of market towns that are droving distance for sheep, distance, a day's journey between each other for markets, and then like satellite of village around them. And the exception to that kind of rule was this massive industrial explosion that happened in the east with coal mining and steel manufacture. And in the West, more things like slate and gold mining and things like that, and shipping. But all of that, with not quite entirely, but most of that has gone. And with it has gone the people. The people have left to the cities. Young people go to the cities. People who move in tend to be people who are retiring. People come in on holidays. And so there's a sort of, Wales is changed, North Wales is changing out of all recognition. But what is particularly unique, I'd say, like the crown jewels, if you like, apart from the beautiful landscape and mountains, lakes, and all the rest of it, and wonderful weather, is the Welsh language. This is so like in South Wales, you've got rugby, and you've got the valleys, and you've got all these different cultural markers that is Welshness, if you like. In North Wales doesn't have those other markers. Welsh is the marker, and the Welsh is spoken in lots of different parts in Wales. South Wales is, but in North Wales there's a sort of a block of Welsh speaking community that is it's not a toy language. It's not. This is people's first language. This is the language of their heart and worship. One of our elders at the church plant, he's in his, I won't say exactly how old he is, but he's in his 60s, let's say. And he said it was a couple of years ago. It's the first time he ever spoke to God in English. So that's quite insightful, you know, and that creates a very particular, the management, you don't want to be part of a movement that is eroding a people's cultural asset. Revelations talks about every tribe and tongue and nation. So you have to work with some humility and respect towards that reality, while balancing that against what, how do we do church planting in those areas? If you're first language English speaking, even if you learn Welsh, I mean, here's your controversial statement, I guess. Even if you learn Welsh, it's not the same. It's good. It's good to learn some Welsh in those contexts, and maybe people's unique gifting, that could work. But generally, there's something about, I could learn Welsh, but I'd never be able to speak Welsh in the way that somebody speaks Welsh because it's their language, so that creates quite an interesting dynamic. And the geography just means that a lot of these communities are very disparate from each other. So you go right over to the west, you've got like people at Penrhyn Dydreith. They've just sold their old building. They're putting a new venture to put a new chapel project in the middle of their village. That's right out in the west. There's a very high majority Welsh speaking area, although it's an English speaking service. Whereas up in Pwllheli, there's a Welsh speaking church. There's Welsh speaking churches up on Ynysmon, which is Anglesey. There's a new Welsh speaking congregation started in Blaenau Ffestiniog, which, like, we jokingly call Mordor. It's like it's kind of like it's up on top of a mountain, huge great slate quarries, if you can imagine.
The big eye at the top of the church.
Exactly. But actually, there's just very lots of complex situations there, and people are starting a church, and a Welsh speaking church is absolutely the right thing to be doing there.
Yes, so that area is possibly one of the only areas across Britain, I guess, whereas the bilingual services are much more common. and not because of kind of immigration necessarily. Naturally.
Yeah, right, exactly. And so, Britain is not a monoglot country. It's like there are still people groups here who speak other languages than English. I mean, they're amazing. They all speak English, and they switch into English brilliantly. But it's if you go to a sort of an English speaking service, you're making some kind of a concession that you're not making if you're going to a group that's meeting in your own language. Yeah. And it's all well and good. And, I might say, Bora Paul, Croeso ni Jesu Christ at the beginning of a service, which is probably a very badly pronounced, welcome everybody, greetings in the name of Jesus. And it's a gesture, and I think it's a courtesy. But in the end, because we've got maybe 15, 20% of our congregation be Welsh speaking. A lot of the kids are learning Welsh at school. Their whole education is in Welsh. It's not just like they're learning Welsh. But in the end, it's not the same as going to a service where, you pray in your own language.
Sure.
So it's just a sensitivity I think one needs. And I guess we're going to talk about prayer a bit later, but for people who are part of that community to be affected powerfully by the gospel and to actually hear God's calling into ministry and church planting from within their own context, that would be nothing short of a miracle and wonderful to behold. That would be like a top up there prayer, request really, I guess.
Wonderful.
But there's lots of Brummies and Liverpudlians and Mancunians and Londoners and all sorts of people and people coming from the Midlands. It's this part of the world on the east. It's very accessible to Liverpool and Chester and Manchester. So there's quite a lot of work. So it's a good place. It's a really nice place to live. It's a lovely place to live. The North Coast tends to be people who've retired. And then there's, a place like Rhyl is, I think, not just in Britain, but in Europe, one of the poorest places in Europe.
Wow. Okay.
And that's terrifying. And that's just like half an hour, 40 minutes from here. So there are these spots where people have been perhaps moved out of Liverpool post-war or kind of collapsed communities, and there's a lot of drug problems and stuff like that. So it's got social problems like everywhere. And and as you go around, the middle of the country is probably the area which is we're not like, there was a big Christian chapel culture in North Wales. It was very established, and it really has sort of died the death, really, for sociological, theological, and probably other reasons. And it is fresh ground in a lot of ways for a new work. It's not just post-Christian, it's kind of pre-Christian in a lot of ways. Christianity is some sort of distant, historical and foreign entity that we have a great opportunity, I'd say, to kind of represent to people with fresh ears. I think that these are great days to be living as a Christian. I really do. I'm excited. I think the death of nominalism is one of the, as controversial, I know there's some value in trying to recover of that heritage and rebuild those things and stuff like that. But I'm more of the persuasion, like a fresh start.
Yeah, you'd almost want someone to not believe than to say they believe when they don't really. That's a much better place to be in, I suppose. And maybe that's kind of where, it's kind of where we are in those kind of areas which has that kind of shared history and kind of, the distant memory of, but actually not really sure what it is. And actually then suddenly, that's what the truth of Christianity is. That's amazing.
Yes. That's exciting. And I'd say that John Stevens came down to the Liverpool conference. He just shared about how people around the country are sort of saying people are wandering into church and, rocking up with questions, and they don't really know what Christianity is, but they're curious. And I'd say that's our experience as well. There are people sort of just showing up, and because it's kind of almost like a new thing, and that's good because, the old form of Christianity had become, perhaps, again, this might be controversial, a bit legalistic, a bit kind of lace curtain twitching, and overly established and almost like become kind of gone over, when you get a plant that kind of goes over. This is ploughing over again, reseeding, replanting, renurturing, starting over. And I think that makes for an exciting proposition, really. And if there's anybody out there who's a GOG and Welsh speaking, and they've drifted over and they're living somewhere in Liverpool or something, and here's this, and fancy coming back.
Come on over. Get in touch, yeah. Thinking about that area, those things about North Wales, especially kind of the sparseness of it, and then the communities being very difficult. I suppose the language barrier as well. Do they pose a lot of challenges for churches? How do you kind of think about overcoming them?
I think you have to. It's that combination of kind of confidence in God and boldness on the one hand, but enough wisdom to know there are issues you have to be sensitive to. We want the offence to be the cross, not the clumsy way that we kind of mismanage our cultural kind of signifiers, I guess. So I think a good dose of humility and a real passion to make the gospel known and make that the main thing. And I suppose that maps onto what I was saying about Jewish mission in that sense. It's like, there has been extraordinary times in the past, and you have to sort of do the painful thing of letting that go and meet what's right in front of you here and now. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there's room for Urdu-speaking churches in North Wales and Cantonese and Yoruba. Like there's loads of Nigerians showing up in Bangor where there's a university, for example. There might be a Yoruba fellowship. I don't know. But this is Wales. This is the 21st century. The people who live here, this is the world they're living in. These are the social challenges. There's a lot of underemployment. And that leads to a kind of an apathy or a kind of social frustration. The gospel speaks into those things, and it has a great reviving power for people who are living in difficult places, as well as the majesty of the landscape does declare the glory of God. You can't duck it. But if you live there and you're trying to make a living, and the healthcare is a bit dodgy, and you have to travel an hour to get to a hospital, drive for an hour to get to a hospital or something, and then wait 36 hours in A&E.
That's the reality of life.
It is. A lot of service jobs, tourism as an industry is, it's got its opportunities, but it also hollows out communities as well. And there's how do you push back against that? So the politics of all of that. So. Yeah, I don't know. That's a little bit of my take on North Wales. But
are there any particular areas of North Wales that you see kind of underrepresented, especially by the gospel? Kind of have a bit of a gospel drought necessarily that we could be thinking about going towards to reach?
Yeah. So I mean, there's a town called Dolgellau. And I have some connections there. And it's extraordinary. The largest congregation in Dolgellau, by a country mile, is the Jehovah's Witness.
Right.
And I'd be interested even if I don't think this goes online and you have comments, if anybody knows of any town anywhere in Britain where the largest congregation is the Jehovah's Witness. And by a country mile, so... Yeah, that's what I'd call underrepresentation.
Yeah,
there is. I mean, there are some chapels which are still going, but most of them are pretty small. And I think there'd be a number of places where there is ample capacity for Christian, the establishing of Christian works. And I suspect that it would be a question of picking up these towns that I was talking about, like this network of towns and their villages. You could be going around picking off these nodes and moving into across the country and building a network. So definitely, as you go towards the centre, and I suppose towards the west, probably that network feels weaker. But then there's also the Welsh-speaking network, which has its own internal strength, but doesn't reach across necessarily as far as this. And it's encouraging that we're building, there are evangelicals working unusually this in Wales. It's not the Church of England, it's the Church in Wales, which is not the established church in Wales. So there's the Episcopalians, and there are evangelicals working in what I think is a pretty difficult context. And I'm really thankful to know some of them. And the Presbyterian Calvinistic Methodist Church is the actual established church, is the official church for Wales. And again, broadly on the outside, you say this is a liberal denomination, but there are, in fact, at the moment, the General Secretary is a believer, and there are a network of evangelicals starting to kind of seek to replant things. Baptist Union as well, they're believers who are seeking to do things. So there's, and I think we're all past that phase where we're sort of looking at our respective denominations and sort of sniffing. We're supporting a church plant from the International Presbyterian Church in our neighbouring town, I think, which is what the subject of the podcast last time. So I think we're more concerned most people are mostly concerned about the gospel.
Yes.
You may be AOG, you may be Anglican, as it were, you may be whatever, but, if you're gospel-minded, you're gospel-focused, I think there's a general mood of openness that might not have been there before. So that's heartening. That is heartening. Good. I think FIEC's definitely got a part to play, but maybe one of the risks is that we are perceived as an English outfit. And to some extent that's true. But it'd be lovely to think that FIEC in North Wales would also become sort of understood to be properly North Walian body. Yeah. It's this part of the country.
Great.
Yeah,
something to think about for sure. I helped look at the website. I don't know how we could translate it into Welsh. I mean, that'd be a big job, but I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, so a lot of things is done bilingually over here. I mean, I went to a conference, a church planting conference the other day, and it was a Welsh-speaking conference. And there was a chap, you got an earpiece, and there was a chap at the back translating. So if you spoke in English, you knew everybody understood you, so you could speak your language. But if you were first language Welsh, you could speak Welsh naturally, and it just got translated very quickly into your ear. It was excellent. I mean, it was really excellent. I was thinking the part in a church service, if it was a Welsh-speaking church, as that was, it's Caer Salem at Carnarvon, which is a Baptist Union church. But the minister there's a brother. I suppose fellowship the bit, and nobody's going to put an earpiece in your ear and translate the conversation you're having. So you're either forcing people to speak in English to you, not forcing, but kind of expecting that. Or so I think you'd probably, if you're going to go to a church like that, I think you'd have to be pretty purposeful that you're going to learn to speak Welsh.
But loving is to bear with one another and to accept people even when it doesn't quite go how you want it to be. And that's a good thing. The more that we can do that, then we can live more and more like Jesus in that sense.
Yeah, indeed, definitely.
So just as we come to finish, then we love when FIEC churches can support one another. That's a big part of what FIEC is doing, and especially through prayer. Mm-hmm. So if there were churches who would like to pray for ministry and churches in North Wales, what are a couple of things that they could pray for, especially?
So I'd say the strengthening of our cross organizational relationships with where gospel centeredness is the point of agreement. I think the strengthening of that would be ENW, ACW. There's so many different organizations getting us all working well together. That's already starting, but pray that would continue and grow. Pray particularly for what I'd call not just brown site, but green site church planting. So it's not just building on what's been, but actually planting something afresh. There are a couple of towns, maybe Ruthin, Dolgellau, are a couple perhaps worth mentioning. pray that, as is always the case, that like this will be true everywhere. Everybody's stretched for resources. Everybody's run off their feet. So for strength and for perseverance, self-sacrifice, I think, is like taking up your cross kind of stuff. Is really feels very critical here, and I'm very conscious of the way people are laying down their lives for the gospel around the place that people be upheld, and pray for Welsh speaking Wales as well. Pray for us, a work of God to grow and increase, that can partner, in a real sense.
I confess when I hear about all nations, tribes, and tongues, I haven't really thought that it's going to be Welsh there. But of course, Welsh will be one of those tribes, nations, tongues. They'll be worshiping the Lamb in heaven, won't they?
Here, a fun fact here, and I think a lot of people don't know this. Maybe is like the great Whitfield, the great kind of revival, the Great Awakening that took place. It was particularly effective in Wales. And then there was the 1859 revival in Wales that was very famous. And then, of course, the 1904 revival. So there's been these waves of powerful works of God in Wales. But what people don't recognise or realise that almost exclusively that happened through the medium of Welsh.
Wow.
So Here Is Love, Vast as the Ocean, all these kind of songs that people, those songs were written and sung in Welsh and have been subsequently translated into English.
Right.
And so I think if you're growing up in the English speaking world, you kind of think, oh, well, it's Wales is part of England, really, sort of thing. They're speaking English. And, Whitfield was an English speaker. I'm not saying there weren't, but, Daniel Rowland, Hal Harris, all these sort of people, they were, Welsh speakers, and the congregations were Welsh speaking and the singing was Welsh speaking. And it's just good to remember. It's good to remember that Wales is Wales.
For sure.
Cymru.
Yeah, praise God for Wales.
Amen.
Yeah, thanks for your time, Ben. It's really good to chat.
Thank you, Joel.
Hope people have had a little glimpse into North Wales and can continue to pray for them. And for you as well in your ministry in Ebenezer, FIEC, IMGP,
Bless you.
Reach North Wales. Anyone? Any of those? Yeah. Thanks to everyone else who've been watching and listening as well. I hope this has been helpful and encouraging to you. Please do share it with others if you have, and rate and review and all that kind of stuff. And we'll see you again next time. Thanks.
Bless you. So.